So I think we're going live on YouTube right now. Welcome to Talk of Christ, Faith, Family, and Adventure. And I'm Steve Hunt hosting a discussion today. My own home internet is not working. So here I am in front of a green screen on my phone, inviting some panelists here, our whole group just about, to join me in a discussion about a phrase that has been floating around the internet for several years. That is that which is good about Mormonism is not unique, and that which is unique about Mormonism is not good. And so we kind of want to debate or discuss that phrase, but I am not certain that we have someone who wholly agrees with that statement here to present the affirmative side, but we will allow Jacob Ostler to start by discussing what it means and maybe supporting that argument a little bit. And let's just have a discussion. Jake?
Sure. So yeah, taking the phrase just at face value, obviously it's overly simplistic. It doesn't have a lot of nuance to it. And so it's kind of all one person has to say is like, oh, I think this is unique and it makes me happy, and the phrase falls apart, right? I think what the meaning is trying to express, and this is what someone on the internet has said, that they think that what they're trying to express through it is that I do not have to stay in Mormonism to get the good things I enjoyed about Mormonism in my life. They're available elsewhere without the baggage or pain that I have been experiencing in this religion. So I think that is more of what someone's trying to convey when they say that. And it's just, it's like a TikTok type real quick. Oh, how do you answer this? But getting to the heart of that, I think, right, let's go ahead and talk about what does a nuanced view of it look like for the positive? What does it look like for the negative, right? What do we have that's unique about Mormonism we can point at and say, that doesn't seem to be good? And then we'll go to the flip side, right? What can we point at Mormonism and say, this can, by, a general consensus, say, yes, this is good. This is a positive impact.
Well, could I just want to jump in with one observation that might at least draw a boundary around the conversation, which is that, if somebody says, everything that I liked about Mormonism I can get somewhere else, I think that there's a large proportion of active LDS members who would say, in the first instance, if they are true believers in the central truth claims of the Mormon Church, that this is the only authorized religion, that the priesthood was restored to Joseph Smith, etc. Those things you cannot get; they're not fungible to other religions. You can get truth claims in other religions, but if you are a believer in these truth claims, you can't get them in another religion. And so some people may feel that they simply can't, no matter how pragmatically effective any other church or non-church is at giving them, happiness in this life, they simply can't cut off their or transfer their belief in the truth claims of the church. So I just wanted to put that to the side. This is a discussion more along pragmatic lines. As a pragmatic religionist, someone who is trying to derive benefit from being a believer in a religion or a follower of a religion, what benefits can I derive in this life, as opposed to saying this is a discussion of, whether the church is true or not. I don't know if any of that made sense, but I would think that some people, and I'm not saying whether I would group myself with this group or not, but some people would think you can't so glibly have a discussion of, whether a membership in a church is pragmatically beneficial without acknowledging that there may be other reasons, i.e. truth claims, that people participate in a religion. Go ahead, though.
Sure. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone that actually holds a view that's closer to what we're talking about here, right? The response to what you said would be more like, well, right, you're getting into the individual truth claims. I don't have to go, like, Mormonism isn't unique in that saying they're not only some people will take it as to be like the one true religion, or even like the most correct religion, right? Pretty much every other religion says that as well. So it's like, if I wanted to find a one true religion, that's not unique to Mormonism.
Understood. The concept of a truth claim is not unique. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that by their nature, a truth claim or of exclusivity is non-fungible. You can't just find that same truth claim in another church. You can find the identical truth claim for that church, but maybe I'm not making sense here. I think I'm understood. I'm just not putting it in.
Okay, you're saying you don't get the unique claims of Mormonism, yeah.
Right, but what would happen? Right? So the other face of this, is they'd say like, well, those unique truth claims that Mormonism is claiming, those aren't good, right? They have a negative impact, cultish mentality or whatever, right? And we can get more in depth on that. That's what I'm talking about. What I think would be more beneficial right now would be to hear from former members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Marty, Joey, when you hear this, what do you think? Does part of it resonate with you? What's your perspective on it?
I'll go. So it's definitely, it resonates, and but the oversimplistic thing is very much true in my head. Like, I think you articulated it pretty well, like what people mean by it when they say it. Yeah, when Dave was saying, the theology is very unique. So it is kind of a interesting comment to make, because I was talking to my husband about this. I made some notes and stuff, and the theology is very unique. It's not like there's anything else like it. So, and personally, we kind of like the story of the theology. It's just we don't literally believe. And so as far as going to church, it's like there's just kind of this barrier to entry where you have to like kind of state, like at the end of every lesson, it's like, this is true, right? So it's just not something we can fully participate in, but the theology itself is quite unique. I'm trying to think of other thoughts. Like I basically made a list of.
Can I ask you, Marty, which parts of the theology that you feel are most unique?
Well, like I was thinking, or just about Mormonism in general. I feel like family history is pretty unique to Mormonism. I don't know of other religions that focus that much on that. Just family focused. Maybe other religions, they are family focused, but not quite to the extent. Like the plan of salvation in our theology, I don't think it's quite there in other. I don't have experience outside Mormonism as far as other faiths go. So maybe I'm wrong on that. But ministering, I don't think I've heard of that in other faiths. Maybe it is. Those were some things that I kind of feel are, as I was brainstorming, I can see good aspects of those things that are unique to Mormonism. Those were the things I came up with. But that's what you asked, right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
And I also want to make just a clarification, because when I watched your interview with Steve, we were just hearing about your faith journey, and it seemed like when you were mentioning your husband that he was still kind of in the church. Are you both out of the church right now?
Yeah, I should have summarized that and then let Steve like ask me questions that were more specific. It's so hard though, because it's all related in my head, so it's hard to tell you just a snippet, because I don't want it to be interpreted in a way that makes, I don't know, it's like I want control of what happened, because this is the whole thing.
Because I heard the way, and I thought that's what you were saying, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, yeah, we're on the same page now. So,
okay, Joey, what about you when you hear that?
It resonates. It certainly resonates. I do agree with. I mean, so Jackson was the one that brought this up on Facebook, and I was just reading through his original post about it. And yeah, Googling it, I can find it going back to at least 2015, floating around different circles. But it resonates with me certainly. But I agree with everyone else that it's maybe oversimplistic. It's not 100% true all the time. There are some things that are. So I want to say things like, obviously I still believe in Christ. I still believe in Jesus and the story of Jesus. But the version that I believed when I was LDS is very different from the version I believe now. I believe that atonement works a totally different way, than how I thought it worked before. There's all sorts of differences. And yeah, I mean, I'm a faithful Presbyterian. So on some level, I agree that everything that was unique about Mormonism, I've now rejected that, and I've accepted new things that are that are unique to evangelicalism or Protestantism or whatever, that you can't find in the LDS church. But there's plenty of things that were there that I feel like I still have. The fellowship that you have with other believers in a church, that kind of thing is there. I mean, if you're going to church because that's where all my friends are, well, I have lots of friends at my church. I can feel that same kind of fellowship in my church that you do in yours. We sing hymns in my church. If you like singing hymns, you can find that other churches. And a lot of your favorite hymns are the same ones that we sing in my church. So there's things like that are the same in both places and that are good. I have I think a very healthy respect for what is unique in Mormonism. We've had some, I'm going to bring up free will again. I don't mean to open that. We've opened that can of worms too many times on this channel, but
I said maybe you have no choice but to open that up again.
Right. Yes. You're right. But it's things like that are like, I have a healthy respect for the consistency of the beliefs within Mormonism. You believe in metaphysical libertarian free will, and it's really only possible to believe that if you believe that you have always coexisted alongside God, that you are an infinite, eternal intelligence that's always existed. That is precisely the foundational doctrine that allows you to believe in a true metaphysical free will. Everyone else who believes in or claims to believe in a true metaphysical free will has to sneak it in the back door somehow if they believe in like ex nihilo creation or whatever. You have to sneak free will in the back door somehow, and it's always a little disingenuous. And I think you guys, that's something that's unique about Mormonism that I hesitate to say that it's good because I don't believe it. I think it's but it's at least unique and very interesting, and I think very consistent. And so there's a lot of things like that. But however, I think you can get that in other places too. There's process theology and open theism and some of these other places now that are outside of the Latter-day Saint tradition, where their concept of God, their concept of man, their concept of time, and their concept of agency is very similar to the Latter-day Saint concepts. So maybe those aren't unique, right? And they're if we think they're good, well, guess what? You can find them somewhere else. So I don't know. I don't know. As an outsider, yeah. Do I agree with the idea? I guess I do, but yeah, I think there's nuance, there's subtlety. I wouldn't just, I guess I'm not as I'm not as polemic as to say that, oh yeah, that's yeah. I'm not just going to accept the statement on its face, but.
Could I say one thing about this? If somebody says, I love cinnamon rolls, and somebody else says, what is it you love about them? And you say, I don't know, I kind of love the whole thing. And they say, well, is it the cinnamon? Because you can have cinnamon on crumble cake, And you go, well, no, it's not just the cinnamon. And they go, well, is it the frosting? Because, you can get that frosting on, whatever other treat. Sorry, I hadn't thought this through. Is it the whole combo? And you go, no, it's not any of the components. It's, it's all of it put together. And they go, well, that, you've got me there because that's just a cinnamon roll. And I can't say that you're going to get a cinnamon roll through some other means. And it's like, well, yeah, you're not. That's why you like cinnamon rolls. So I guess it's a little it's simplistic and reductive, as we've all said. It's also the fallacy of composition, or is it the other one, the opposite of the fallacy of composition? I'm not sure. But to say that just because any of an entity's parts can be found elsewhere, that entity is not, as a sum of its parts, a unique entity or something like that can't, as a composed entity, have its own value that's irreproducible. All right, go ahead.
To extend your analogy, the same is true about a person. I really, really like my wife. Well, what is it you like about her, right? Well, I like her blonde hair. Well, you could find a blonde-haired woman somewhere else, Well, I really like her, greenish blue eyes. Well, you could find that in another woman too. I really like the way that, she that she loves and supports me. Oh, I bet you could find another woman who loves and supports you too. But it's everything, right? So yeah, I had that same kind of a reaction to the statement. Is of course there are some things in the Latter-day Saint theology and religion and whatever that first of all are perhaps not very good. There are some things that I can criticize in the culture and in what some people believe. So I can agree with that. I can also agree that there are great things found elsewhere. I can agree that that there are great things found in Latter-day Saint theology, including a belief in the Son of God and also a strong family value that could perhaps be found elsewhere. I know that when I was on my mission, we came across Mennonites, and the Mennonites seem to have an incredible family ethic and value that I always thought was to be emulated. And so, yeah, of course, there are some things you can find elsewhere, or great things in Mormonism that you can find elsewhere. But as you're pointing out, Dave, the idea is, though, will you find them all in the same package, in another woman, in another cinnamon roll somewhere else, or do you have to find them here? I don't know. Who was it that said they wanted to jump in here? I saw a hand go up.
Okay. So the thought that I was having is, as you were saying that, like, I actually agree with everything you guys just said. And I was trying to figure out, like, why does this resonate with people that leave, or at least people that don't believe? And I think you have to have that loss of belief for it to make sense, or at least, like, for example, as you are losing your belief, you're justifying staying for a while by saying, it still makes me a better person, or like, so you're just justifying continuing to act like you believe, even though you actually don't really believe it anymore. Kind of like that more pragmatic thing that you were talking about earlier, Dave. So it's like, so you're justifying staying, and you stay for a while. And I lived like that for quite a while. I wouldn't even say I still had this desire to believe. I just couldn't honestly say I believe. And so what happens, I think, is you kind of start to realize there's actually, if it's not the belief that's keeping you there, it's not the theology, you don't actually have those truth claims are starting to actually make church harder for you than actually make you love going to church, then you start to realize all these good things that you're getting from church you can find elsewhere. I think that's maybe where that comment is lit up, maybe. I don't know.
Okay. I want to get over to Jackson, and I think this is a good segue, because he had posted a response, or a short response, and then there was a conversation on Facebook. So I think what really this gets targeted towards is, okay, there are aspects that are unique to Mormonism that can be considered not good. Because what he said on his Facebook wall was like, it's not the exact inverse, but you can't also say the same thing in defense. You can't say, well, that's wrong with the church is wrong in all the other churches too. He said, that would be also too simplistic. There are things. So maybe what are some things that are unique in Mormonism that we can, in a general consensus, look at and say, like, that is not good and that shouldn't be happening? And do those outweigh the positives?
Yeah, I think that's very important to consider, Jacob. And one of the things that, like, I struggle with just with these kinds of conversations in general is the kind of the subjectivity, the inherent subjectivity that can come in trying to respond to these things, because especially when it comes to the diversity of human experience as far as religion goes, you can have individuals that experience basically the same thing and experience it in very different ways, right? Like, if we use an example of maybe like serving a mission in the LDS church, I know people who absolutely swear by their missions being the best thing ever for their life and being just an amazing, fantastic experience full of growth. And for others, missions can be incredibly traumatic. They can be incredibly difficult. They can be damaging in a number of different ways. And, this could even happen with two individuals that maybe served in the same mission or were companions with one another or something like that, right? So that's what was one of the difficult things for me, as I was trying to think of responses to some of the either pushback or questions I was generating from my original Facebook post, is because people were asking me, okay, well, what's something that's like good about Mormonism? And I'm like, well, I know, in my opinion, things that I like about it, but I know that those things might not be universally shared by others. or as Joey pointed out, some of those things can be contingent on whether or not you affirm the validity of different beliefs too, right? If you didn't believe a certain maybe truth claim or theological tenet, could you really say that it's like good unless you shift it into more of like a material pragmatic discussion? So it does become difficult. But I of course there are more commonly held views that or critiques that might be given of Mormonism that can be more generally shared between members and former members and non-members. Some of the things that I think of, there's toxic perfectionism. There can be like religious scrupulosity. There can be, kind of a culture of maybe judgment or shame or things like that. But
you can find that other places.
Yeah. And so that was kind of my point, like in my post, where I was like, okay, well, let's say the inverse of this and see if it rings true. That which is bad in Mormonism is not unique to Mormonism, and that which is unique to Mormonism isn't bad, right? These statements can be very generalized and too generalized, right? Where my comment on my Facebook post is that I would take issue with either statement, whether one was making it as maybe a former member or a current member in defense of the church. So it's complicated for those reasons, but I do appreciate some of the earlier discussion, which I discovered this too through engaging with different people that maybe this resonated with them. So I appreciate your comments, Marty, because I do think a lot of this can be self-inflicted, where it's common in Latter-day Saint discourse, whether from members or leaders, to imply or even maybe like teach or say that true happiness can't be found outside of the LDS Church, that you won't be able to be fulfilled in the same way. Where will you go? Those kinds of comments. And so I can understand how maybe a phrase like this or the intended sentiment can be very valid for individuals that are looking to find real fulfillment elsewhere.
I like what you were saying there, Jackson, about the subjectivity of whether certain things, certain components of a religion or a belief system are good or bad. That's a very on point thing in this discussion, because in order to affirm or dispute this resolution, you have to, I guess, define what is good and what is bad, and that in and of itself is an incredible challenge, as you pointed out. I mean, and I think Corey wants to address this in just a second, and maybe I should let Corey do it, because he wants to talk about specific things that are unique to Mormonism. But things that come to my mind include things like eternal families, temple services, and temple covenants, and missions, like Jackson has already mentioned, and sending youth off on missions, modern prophets, living oracles of God, new scripture, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants. These types of things can only be found in Mormonism. And the problem with the statement that we're evaluating is that some people will look at everything I just said and say, those are all good. Aren't those amazing? Those are great. And other people will look at them and say, every one of them I disagree with, or I don't think should exist, or I think is bad. So, how do you, it's just a subjective sentence.
The only other thought that I have, and then, I don't know if it's time to close now, but the only other thought I have is that,
chime in.
Yeah, the only other thought that I have is just that this criticism kind of only has teeth if you believe your church is the only true church. In the denominational system, where I affirm the existence of many true churches, many namings of Christ's church, many denominations of Christ's church, I can look across the street at the Baptist church or the Methodist church or the Lutheran church, and I can say, hey, they have a lot of the same good stuff that we have. So what's good about my denomination isn't unique. And I'm okay with that. That's how the denominational system works. It's expected in the denominational system. And I can look at Now, hopefully I'm a Presbyterian because I do really believe that some of the things that are unique to Presbyterianism are good. And I do believe that. But I can look to plenty of things about Presbyterianism that are unique to Presbyterianism that I'm like, that's kind of some baggage we're carrying around that we should find a way to get rid of, you know. Maybe we could be a little more like the Lutherans with regard to this one thing, or like the Methodists with regard to that one thing, you know. There's envy going on between the denominations, and I think that's healthy, that's good. We should be looking at other people that are different from us and asking, hey, what is it that makes them tick? And what can I do to be more like that? Or what do they have that maybe we should try to cultivate in our group, you know? And I think the denominational system allows for that. It's when you say we're the only true church, we have been established by God, by fiat, you know, that this is the only true church. I think that's where you open yourself up to that criticism that, you know, what if stuff's bad about this church, if what's unique about this church is bad, and if what's good about this church can be found in other places, that now suddenly the claim that you're the only true church is under fire, you know? And if you've never made that claim in the first place, then the criticism is kind of like, well, yeah, so what, you know? That might be kind of what gets people's feathers, you know, standing on end about a phrase like this. I don't know.
I'll chime in with something that a thought I've been developing while you've been talking, Joey, which is that I agree with you that this kind of a claim only has teeth if you have an exclusive truth claim in your church. That is, it only challenges that kind of a believer, but it also doesn't matter at all to that kind of a believer, because that kind of a believer is not following a church based on a pragmatic calculation of what's good and bad or beneficial or not. They're following their church because they believe it's true. And so it's kind of a useless sentiment, because it's going to resonate with a lot of people for whom it will make no practical difference in their life, because they're not that kind of a believer that it's kind of aimed at. It's like so many political criticisms in that respect, in that it will thrive in an echo chamber, but it won't actually challenge the people that it's directed at.
Yeah, and that echo chamber, the converse of that is that, yeah, it will thrive and it will gain a lot of teeth. As you say, people will accept it and love it when they are justifying their personal reasons for leaving. And I'm not criticizing those for leaving, but they want to have something to prop them up to say, well, I left because I could find everything good elsewhere, and I found nothing, and the only things that I found there that were unique.
But by whose definition of good? We're back to the subjective definition of good.
Yeah.
Right.
Everything that I thought was good about it, I'm finding over here. Yeah, you know, yeah.
None of this means that this statement is wrong or harmful or anything like that. Just that it will be viewed as inapplicable to the people at whom it is directed.
Right. Yeah.
Corey hasn't spoken.
Corey, share with us. I think, let's wrap this up here. Maybe Corey, and then anybody else who wants to share. What are some things that are unique about Mormonism that you find to be unique about Mormonism? And you can say in your own subjective opinion whether you think they are good or bad. Let's wrap it up there.
Yeah, okay. Because I was going to, that caveat of like, these are just, for me, what rings true. And so that all that subjectivity goes back. But like, for me, this is my favorite stuff about Mormonism, okay? And not every Mormon actually probably believes the exact of this, but this is the things I've honed in on. So call it gospel a la carte if you want, but, I don't usually toss out. Anyway. All right, so I like the statement or the idea that Mormonism is truth, no matter where it is or where it comes from. That was a Joseph Smith thing, and meaning like Mormon just means truth. And so I like that. And though you will agree that obviously there are, especially lately, there's a portion that say like, oh, we're scared of science, and those discoveries like, oh, dinosaurs are threatening. A lot of evangelicals have that kind of sentiment, not all obviously, but I think Mormonism has room for, if they choose. I know a lot of people, there's some stuff about evolution stuff, but if we embrace all truth, then we shouldn't be scared of new scientific discoveries, as well as that segues into the next thing, which is something we've already shared about, that is continuing revelation. And so I love the fact that Mormonism states, and I know this, maybe there's other people that say this, but like the fact that the canon of scripture is not closed, and that God is not done speaking to his people, not like maybe not even just like, like good feelings as like a lot of people out, but like literally there's a prophet, or at least they claim that there's a prophet, right? And this prophet can receive like direct either orders from God or scripture, and on the personal level there, but I don't think the personal is exclusive to Mormonism. I love that in Mormonism, well, I'll start here, I guess. I love the two other, like if I had to say there's two categories, the cosmology I love, and I love the view on, like, I guess I just said the revelation and continuing, and salvation. So anyway, I love that in Mormon cosmology, there is not creation ex nihilo, as Joey was mentioning earlier. And with that, we can actually say we have free will and we choose to come into this life, as opposed to a lot of philosophers throughout time be like, oh, God just threw us into life without our choice in the circumstances. And so if we're suffering, or all of the problems of evil are literally directly due to God's choices. And so it lessens the problem of, it changes the problem of evil, we can say. And I also love that because of the idea that we're eternally existing intelligences, and that may come in stages, there's lots of models of that, but it means that we can actually fulfill what Jesus described in John 17 as becoming one with the Father, as Jesus is one with the Father. We can be true peers with God. I love that. And I know that, for example, again, that's a flavor in Joey's religion. That's like, oh, that's the ultimate hubris and desire of the devil to be one with God. But I personally find that more motivating than anything. If it's, for me personally, being like, oh, you can be an angel that, I know this is a caricature, but you can be an angel that like sings praises to God all day long. That's fine. No, you will literally have, as the scripture describes, a shared inheritance with Christ and have all that God has. And I don't know exactly what that means, but there. All right. I do, and I know there's negative side to this, but I do like that Mormonism has a culture of excellence, meaning this life matters, and therefore people try to become the best version of themselves. And again, I know there's a lot of pitfalls to that, and people can get this perfection problem, but the culture of excellence has produced a lot of positive things. And I know it doesn't work for everyone, but you can say that about capitalism too, or whatever. All right. And last, or I guess I already said all this stuff. So just personal revelation, guided by open canon, and the cosmology for me.
Thank you, Corey.
Sure.
Anybody else wants to share unique things?
Yeah, I want to hop in. What's interesting is how much of my list here is related to what Corey was saying. It's almost like we're brothers. But the first thing I had was actually before
well, in the gospel, you really are brothers. You know that.
It's true.
Oh, I forgot one thing that I'll point in. I'll steal it from you, Jacob, if you're going to say it. But I love that in Mormonism, it was a balance for Joseph Smith between, the determinism, meaning God basically has already decided who's going to hell, and universalism, where everyone's going to heaven no matter what they do. But Joseph Smith revealed that everyone who would like to be saved will be saved, meaning salvation truly is up to us, and it's a choice, and God will never say no, and that's my version, I guess, but it's a choice. And I thought that's a wonderful solution to that problem within the Christian tradition.
Yep, you stole that one from me too. But it's okay. My first one was the conglomerate of the teachings, right? It's like everyone was saying before, there's a lot of unique teachings, they don't seem unique because you can find that somewhere else, but nowhere do you find this, all these teachings put together in the way that they work within the fabric of Mormonism as it exists right now. Another one that I put was, and again, we haven't found a very good word for this, but us being of the same species, right, or same make of some sort of base element of what our creator is, right, of God, the Most High, giving us a real trajectory for where we can go, potentially. Granted, due to his nature and what he's always chosen, we can't get there the same path that he took, but that there's a real relation there, and it's like, we're of some shape or form kind of the same thing. And this also goes into a belief of God having a body and having had some sort of earthly experience, right? Or an experience not being above everything, but living on a planet like we are now, like Jesus did, and Jesus saying, doing what he saw the Father do. I think that brings another level of relating, and it's not just subjugation of creatures to a creator. And again, I don't want to make a caricature of evangelical or Presbyterian or any other types of beliefs, but this is what I see unique in contrast to how I understand those beliefs to be. Another one, Corey already took, and I'll just quote Joseph Smith on it, of letting truth come from whence it may, not having to be afraid. It was like, look, we're looking for truth wherever it's at, and wherever comes, we'll find a way to work on it, because there's this continuing search for knowledge, this continuing revelation. And again, it also bleeds into another thing that Corey said. So yeah, a lot of things that were related there. Last one I want to mention is this idea of sealing. And if we take a macro level, it's because everyone's kind of wondering, like, oh, what will sealing be like in the next life? If I'm sealed to my wife and we're sealed to our children, but I'm also sealed to, like, to me, it seems like the whole goal is for the entire human family to be sealed. And we're all really one big family. All those that choose to be a part of what we're being invited into, this familial relationship with God, with Christ, with the Holy Spirit, and all of us that go up into it. It's just this, we're all in this together. It's no longer pitting against those people are going to hell, and I'm the righteous one to bring it up. No matter who you meet in Mormonism, this person, what you brought up, is a spiritual brother or sister. We're all, who's my brother's keeper, or am I my brother's keeper? You are, right? And we're all in it together for everyone's salvation, not just our own. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Anybody else want to talk about, again, what's unique and whether it's good or bad to you? Jackson or Marty or Joey?
Well, so I shared my good list already, and I kind of wanted to, it's just a list. You can ask me questions if you want more explanation, but it's interesting because I actually had things on both lists, because it's not even, I couldn't even decide whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. So I said plan of salvation on my good list, but I also put on my not good list. And it's not because, to me, it's like the theology part of it's really cool, but the part of it where I'm not sure we can know that much about the afterlife is not good in my head. So it made both. Polygamy, a living prophet. So that was, Steve was saying, oh, we have a living oracle. And I'm just like, I don't know that we should put, and I think that comes from my experience where I was trying to align my will with the prophet, not God. It doesn't make sense. Like, I was trying to align my will with God. And really that was everything the church taught me, that what God was. And so I was aligning my will with really the church and the prophet, not God, from my perspective now. Anyway, so those are things, because by having a living prophet, and I don't know, I think people in other faiths probably still do that to a certain extent. Like, they'll probably align their will with their favorite pastor or favorite leader of some sort. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily unique to Mormonism, but having a living prophet, I remember that being a very comforting belief as a believer, because I was like, God is not dead. He's still talking to us. Like, that's really cool. And from my perspective now, I guess I just see, I realize that I'm not getting really prophetic things. So it's just a guy claiming to be God, which can be really dangerous, I guess. So anyway, it hit my not good list. So
maybe throwing a wrench into that as well. A prophet that can be wrong.
Right.
Thank you. Jackson or Joey, you want to share yours? No? That's fine.
The old Mexican stand-up.
Yeah, no worries. If you have one, it's time to go now, and otherwise I'll wrap up the conversation. Joey, got anything you want to say?
Well, as other people have been sharing the list, I made a list of what's unique about Presbyterianism that I think is good.
Jump in. Go for it.
So, you guys have mentioned lots of things, and I would, again, on somebody's subjective measurement of what's good, right? I can go through the list of all of those and point out where I think the Bible says you shouldn't believe that, right? That's maybe another fodder for some other episode. I don't know. So, and actually what's unique to Presbyterianism isn't the opposite of all those things, right? because most Presbyterians would deny, or most Protestants or most evangelicals would deny LDS cosmology or deny, a lot of those things that are unique to Mormonism, right? So my belief in the Trinity, for instance, is not something that's unique to Presbyterianism. It's a good thing that I can find in all the other denominations, right? What's unique about Presbyterianism? Our form of church government is kind of unique. A lot of evangelical churches are either congregational, or if you go toward things like Lutheranism or Anglicanism, you get a very Episcopalian or Catholic, right? Very top-down Episcopal, the Pope is at the top and all the bishops report up through him. The Presbyterian form of church government is it's an interconnected web. It's a network where all the pastors, nobody's really at the top, nobody's really at the bottom. All the pastors are mutually accountable to each other. And there's a system of higher courts. So if my pastor did something, enacted some form of church discipline against me, and I disagreed with him, I can go to the presbytery. I can appeal to a higher court, right? And have it retried, in that higher court. So I think that form of church government is pretty unique to. There's a few denominations I think that do practice that same Presbyterian form of church government, but covenant theology I think is pretty unique to Calvinism, Presbyterianism, the Reformed. Covenantal infant baptism is pretty unique. Our confession of faith, the Westminster Confession of Faith, is unique, and I really like it. I think it's a solid confessional document. It's been copied, like the London Baptist Confession, that it was like a 50 or 100 years later, kind of copied it and just changed a few of the sections. So unique. I don't know. There's a few other confessions that used it as a template, but I think it's pretty unique and good. What's unique about Reformed Presbyterianism that's bad? Jackson talked about like religious scrupulosity and judgmental attitudes. You see a lot of that in a lot of Presbyterians think it isn't like an only true church mentality, but it's a very similar kind of like, we're the smartest ones. We've read the Bible better than you have, and we've got the best exegesis. We've got the best hermeneutic. We're a lot of Presbyterians. There's a lot of scholarly, like there's yeah. And I think that can be good and it can be bad, right? So that's stuff about Presbyterianism. I would say is sometimes gets us in trouble. But that's my list. I can't think of anything else that's like super unique about Presbyterianism.
Would you then just, in short, though, you would agree that someone could use the same phrase, either the affirmative or the converse of it for Presbyterianism too? They could say that what's unique can be found elsewhere, right, and or is not good or whatever, the same kind of phrase. Or they could also say, what's bad about Presbyterianism, right, can be found elsewhere. And, I mean, it can be applied to
right. Absolutely, it can. But I would say that it has less teeth just because we don't make any exclusive claim to like we're the only true church.
Yeah, no, I'm just seeing how it fits. Great, yeah.
Which is not to say like I do believe in take covenant theology, right? I believe in covenant theology. I'm not going to say that I have any divine warrant for believing it. It's just as I read my Bible, it's the way that makes the most sense of what's there in the text, and so I believe that it's right. But I wouldn't, and that's why I'm a Presbyterian, right? But I'm not going to look down the nose at my Lutheran buddy who doesn't agree with covenant theology just because he doesn't agree with covenant theology. So, and it's the difference in the denominational system that I recognize you as a true Christian church across the street from mine, even though there are differences, right? So,
yeah, Jackson.
But yeah, and I think that claim that there are good things that are unique, there's bad things that are unique, and vice versa. I think that's like built into the denominational system almost. So,
thank you, Jackson. You got any unique things you share at Mormonism?
Yeah, definitely like coming from like a religious studies context, this conversation is difficult because I don't know, even other contemporary traditions, there's ones with modern day prophets or prophetic leaders or a variety of different things that like generally are pointed to within the Mormon tradition as being unique, but are either present currently in other faith traditions or historically have been present in other faith traditions. Now, one area that I've consistently struggled to find like really any real parallel would be what I consider to be Joseph Smith's King Follett theology, and similar to what Jacob and Corey shared, just how Latter-day Saints view themselves or humanity in relation to God, and some of the really unique theological and philosophical stuff that's going on there. So yeah, that whole kind of side of the faith, I think, is very unique. And there's other things I could point to as well, that I don't know can be highlighted. Like there is a recent article by McKay Coppins in the Atlantic that described Mormonism as the most American religion, right? And so I think that kind of as a religious tradition, Mormonism has a really unique relationship with how it views the United States or where it's situated in American history, and how that can even impact different aspects of its theology.
Which I'll toss out there was our discussion last week. So if you haven't watched that video, go check that one out.
Okay, I will.
Not for you, but anybody watching.
Yeah. So yeah, I do try and give this thought, and again, this is one of the reasons why I think it was difficult for me to respond to some of the questions people were asking me, because I'm like, well, how do you really qualify unique? Because there's a number of things that like are unique. Like you could say that nobody believes in the Godhead like Latter-day Saints do, but that's almost like a tautology. Like, well, yeah, because no one else are Latter-day Saints. If you get very precise with some of the beliefs. So yeah, that's basically what comes to mind.
Thank you. Marty, did you want to share one more thought there before we close up?
Yes. So I did have an overarching kind of interesting thought, because where I don't find myself in any denomination right now, or not really, pretty agnostic in my beliefs, I find the community aspect of religious communities unique to religions. Like I really don't see that in the secular world. So I just wanted to step that back a little bit, because while, because when you posted that, I was trying to think about what is it that we're trying to say. And I think a lot of it, the service, the community, a lot of people like that about the church, and it's hard for them to leave. And that is really done most well when you have a common belief. Like you almost have to have this common belief with a community in order to, it's just like, and then it starts to make sense why it's so hard to be questioned at church. The thing that bothers me, it's like, of course I can't question the thing that's holding everybody together. So, but anyway, that was just the thought I had. I feel like religion has got a hand on community stuff. So
I really appreciate that. Religion and those common beliefs, as you said, kind of bind people together into communities and to support one another, to live together in a little more harmony. And that's not unique about Mormonism, but it is something, as you pointed out, that is unique about, or that may be unique about having some kind of a religious denomination to attend. And that's actually come up with me recently in a discussion with some of my children, as I've been trying to figure out, how to teach them the gospel in ways that they can latch onto and take with them throughout their life. And for me, and I've made it clear in some videos here on this channel, that I believe certain things about the gospel. There are only a few things that I hold really strongly to as being the good news of Christ and the gospel, and almost everything else I kind of say, I don't really know, I don't understand, I don't get it. That's okay. And so as I talk to my children, trying to say, so what is it about the church? And this again came up just this week. What is it about the church that I believe is important? And one of them, as you've just pointed out, Marty, is this common friendship, this community, this welfare, this looking out for each other. You mentioned ministering earlier in this conversation, but the idea that my children, if they, stay in the church, for example, have an automatic bond with people throughout the world in any country that they can go to. And that is, again, not entirely unique to Mormonism, but there is something stronger, I think, in my opinion, about that bond in Mormonism, because the church is so, what's the word I'm looking for? Nearly identical throughout the world, that you fall into.
Correlate.
Yes, thank you. Exactly.
Correlated.
Both of those.
Yeah.
Yes, it was correlated, and so now it's homogeneous. And so as you travel throughout the world, you can find people who believe basically as you do, and you can instantly have friendships, and you can have someone help you move in. And that's the most important thing right there, is if you don't have somebody help you move in, then you're screwed. It's hard to move by yourself. But here's the thing. When, even as we're saying that one of the great things is this homogeneous belief, one of the strongest things that I'd like to wrap up with, that I find to be, I think, unique about Latter-day Saint beliefs, is almost the opposite. It's this idea, and it's come up, it stems from what's come up a couple times in this conversation, that each of us, we are literal children of our Heavenly Father, that we are like him in more ways than many other religions will support or say, that we are divine. Now, I think Eastern religions like to say that we are divine, but we're talking that we're of that same divine essence. And that gives us, as Joey's already pointed out, something unique in Christianity, the ability to really support some free will, and this position that we get to have our own free desires. And so in Latter-day Saint theology, in my understanding of it, that leads to this belief that God, our Heavenly Father, wants us to be happy, wants us to have the desires of our heart, and basically has built a system to enable us to acquire, to obtain the desires of our heart, as varied and widespread as they are. And that, to me, is a powerful, strong belief for anybody inside or outside of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because it means I can look at my friends and family members who are outside of the church, and I can say, you too will receive according to the desires of your heart. And I really appreciate that doctrine. And to say finally, within the church, it seems to me that because we believe in this agency, because we believe because there's so much freedom, we've noted in these videos here that it's hard for us to identify exactly what makes a Mormon. What are the beliefs that you have to have in order to consider yourself a Mormon? And we have not pinned that down in our videos. It's come up a couple times, but we've kind of stayed off of that question, almost because I don't know if there's an answer. What's funny is that you can be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and have a wide variety of beliefs. We here on this video are evidence of that. Some of us have, once we've obtained a certain belief system, we decide we don't fit anymore and we leave. But others can have a belief system that isn't orthodox, quote unquote, and yet stays in the church and get up and testify in church. And well, even if it, and Marty says in the chat here, as long as you don't publish your beliefs. Well, it depends on what they are. And it would be a question to say, what exactly are those beliefs that you can't contradict, or else other people will now consider you not Latter-day Saint. And that's the thing that I'm getting at, is that going around the church, generally speaking, I can get up on YouTube, I can get up in Sunday school, I can get up in church, and I can state kind of my beliefs. And some people might be uncomfortable with them. Some people might question them, but almost never am I going to find someone who's going to get up and say, well, you're not a Mormon. Like, that's just not going to happen. And yet in other religions, I've had more people tell me I'm not a Mormon who are not members of the church I've never had a member of the church say that to me. I've had people who are not members of the church say, you don't sound like you're a Mormon. I don't think you're a Mormon, and I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm trying to explain now again to my children, and this is getting back to the original question, what do I find unique and good about the Latter-day Saint Church? And that is that I think within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as Mormonism is truth from all sources, as has been said, we are able to work out our salvation one-on-one with God that we're able to determine where we're at in our standing with God, one-on-one, even though some people think that we rely on bishops and priests and people in between. We don't. And we get to determine our own faith. And as I'm trying to teach my children, don't let someone else tell you what you believe. And that means people outside of the church coming to you and saying, well, you're a Mormon, so you must believe this. And that means people inside the church saying, well, we believe this, you have to believe this. You are to sit down and go to God, go to the source, and figure out your own beliefs, and study the scriptures and figure out your own beliefs. And I believe that is not as prominent in other religions, where I think if you really come out with your beliefs and if you stray from the line, I think that they're more likely, in fact, the Mormons get a bad rap for all the excommunications that are very publicized. But the fact is, there are many, many thousands and millions more people that you would think, well, why aren't they excommunicated? Well, because we are allowed to believe a wide spectrum of beliefs. And there's a lot of diversity, I think, in Latter-day Saint religion than people give us credit for. And that, to me, is something that I value and cherish. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you letting me wrap it up with my own word, as it's my channel. But I know you may have something to say to that. If you want to, let me know. But leave some comments about your own thoughts. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks. That was fun.